different tastes. Both love hot weather, and one is known for creating heat of its own. These plants produce some of the most colorful vegetables in the garden and some of the most colorful flavors. See what's growing next on Fresh from the Garden. From the garden, I'm Joe Lample. Today I'll be focusing on a pair of vegetables that between the two of them are featured in every type of cuisine you can imagine. They're colorful, flavorful, and they're a member of the tomato family. Well, I'm talking about peppers and eggplants. Now you may wonder why I'd group them together, but the truth is they have several things in common. Both only grow in hot weather and both have very colorful fruit. Today I'll examine each one separately and uncover interesting and useful information to help you have success with growing each of these plants. Peppers come in so many shapes and sizes and colors, it's hard to keep them straight. But luckily, they're all classified into one of two categories, either hot or sweet, and they're measured on a heat index called the Scoville Heat Unit Scale. For example, green bell peppers are at the bottom of the scale with 0 heat units. Jalapeno peppers come in at around 3,000, and Tabasco peppers weigh in at a scorching 60 to 80,000 heat units, and that's hot. But luckily, no matter what type you like, hot or sweet, peppers have a lot to offer. Pepper plants like sunny, hot weather, but the fruits themselves need to be shaded. Plant leaves form a canopy to protect the peppers from direct light. Choose a location that gets full morning sun, but less afternoon direct sun. Afternoon sun can slip under the foliage and scald the ripening fruit. But without enough sun for the foliage, they can't produce high-quality peppers.
When growing peppers, both hot and sweet, look for the late summer sun to make them both colorful and sweeter and hotter. So these are some of the things that look for in growing peppers.
There's an old saying, peppers are happier when they're touching their neighbors. The plants can shade each other if they're planted close enough to touch. Remember, it's the leaves that need the full sun, not the peppers. Now let me show you how I got started with these peppers. Garden centers carry peppers in two different forms, seedlings and seeds. Pepper seeds are slow to get started and can be sensitive to light and temperature changes. Seedlings are easier to get going because the plants are past the difficult germination stage. You're more limited on the variety of pepper seedlings, but they carry a greater chance of success. Look for seedlings that have thicker stems and that aren't flowering yet. You want a pepper plant to spend its energy growing roots, not fruit, for the first few weeks. Peppers really like moist, rich soil that's full of nutrients, and my beds are already filled with compost and topsoil. But peppers really need a lot of nutrients, so I'm also adding some 10-10-10 slow-release fertilizer. And for this bed, which is 3 feet by 12 feet, I'm adding 3/4 of a cup. I'll also come back later with some regular doses of liquid fertilizer. But now all I need to do is mix in this granular fertilizer, and I'm ready to plant my peppers. To plant peppers, make a hole deep enough for the pepper plants to sit even with the top of the soil. Peppers will dry out if they're planted too shallow, and their stems will rot if they're planted too deeply. Some of my peppers came in 6-inch pots, so the holes will be approximately 6 inches deep and 6 inches wide. Pepper plants get 1 to 3 feet tall and about 1.5 feet wide. This bed is 3 by 12, so it was large enough for me to plant 22 pepper plants, and I divided it between hot peppers and sweet peppers. But of the hot peppers, I planted hot banana, chili red, and Tabasco. It's the pepper used in a lot of hot sauces. And if you like Mexican food, you'll know poblano. It's the pepper used in chili relleno. It's hot and sweet at the same time. But if you really want to heat things up, try a habanero. But be careful before you eat this one because it's the hottest one out there. The sweet peppers I planted are yellow bell, red beauty, and yellow wonder bell peppers. They produce very large block-shaped fruit. Bell peppers can be harvested young when they're green, or they can be harvested as they ripen more, turning yellow and then red as they age. Even though bell peppers are considered sweet, there are some types like the fajita bell that are spicier. Peppers, like all members of the tomato family, are susceptible to soil-borne diseases. So I've spread 2 to 3 layers of newspaper around each of these plants, and this will keep the water from splashing back up on the leaves when it rains or when I water. And this is especially important on low-growing plants like peppers. Paper also keeps weeds from popping up and stealing nutrients away from the plants. Now I'm spreading several inches of pine straw around each of these plants, which will keep the paper in place and the soil moist. If you live in a climate where the soil is still cool when you plant peppers, add black plastic to your beds. The black plastic will help the soil hold heat until the ground warms up. Use long nails or stakes like yard staples to hold the plastic in place. Cut slits in the plastic so you can place the plants in the ground. Be sure to leave enough room around the base of the plants to water them. You can remove the black plastic as the soil warms up and the days and nights get hotter. You can use a soaker hose under the plastic to make watering easier if you want. My garden is already warm and sunny and ready to grow peppers. If you're looking for tips on warming up your garden or extending your growing season, there's lots of great gardening resources on the internet, including our website at DIYnetwork.com. There you'll find more information about growing peppers and other garden plants, and step-by-step instructions on this episode and all other Fresh from the Garden shows. When we come back, I'll show you how to plant a cousin to peppers, eggplants. Did you know that eggplant gets its name from its egg-like shape of its fruit? And speaking of eggs, I'll show you how eggshells can keep creepy crawly critters away from your plants. I'll also share a few other tricks for growing great eggplants, and they're all leftovers from the breakfast table. Stay tuned, I'll be right back. Fresh from the garden. On today's show, I'm planting two great garden vegetables, eggplants and peppers. Now both of these can only be planted in the summer when the days are long and the nights are warm. And I've already got a bed full of peppers planted, including hot chili peppers and sweet peppers. But now I'm ready to plant my eggplants. And eggplants, even more than peppers, need warm and sunny conditions because even the slightest frost can damage these plants. So be sure you pick the warmest spot in your garden, like this one, for your eggplants. Eggplant is native to China and India, but they've been grown for hundreds of years in Europe. They produce lots of fruit per plant. Their subtle flavor makes them a good companion with spicier tastes like tomato sauce and curry. They come in a variety of sizes and colors like green, but most are white, dark purple, or some combination of the two. The skin of an eggplant is shiny and smooth.
Eggplant may be eaten with the skin on it. However, once the eggplant is large enough, the skin may become tough, and you need to peel it before you eat it.
Eggplants are heavy feeders, so I need to be sure the ground is full of the nutrients they need. And the bed is already loaded with compost and topsoil, which is great for eggplants. But since they need high levels of nutrients over the entire growing season, I'm adding a slow-release fertilizer, the same that I used for the peppers. And this nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium balance of 10-10-10 means they'll get a balanced dose of all three critical nutrients. And they need all three to thrive. But now all I need to do is finish adding this fertilizer and turn it in so I can plant my plants. Now that the soil is prepped, it's time to add these stakes. You see, one of the big differences between the way peppers and eggplant grow is that eggplants do better when they're staked. Because the fruit of an eggplant is larger and heavier, you can imagine a plant full of fruits could bend over and break. So the way to protect against that is to add these strong supports to each of the new plants. And it's best to do that before planting so you don't damage the root of existing plants. For these plants, I used 6-foot-long 1x2 boards to create the stakes. I pounded them into the ground with a large hammer until each stake was at least 18 to 24 inches deep, leaving about 4 feet above the ground. I placed the stakes 24 inches apart to allow room for the plants to grow. Now that my stakes are in the ground, I'm ready to plant my eggplants, and I'm using the same technique I did when I put my peppers in the ground, making sure that the root ball of the plant is level with the soil in the bed. Now this first variety is called Black Beauty, and it's a large bushy plant that produces between 6 and 12 dark purple fruits. Now this fruit will get quite large if you leave it on the vine, but you can also harvest it while it's young and still tender. But be careful if you do let it go on the vine because it can develop a spongy interior and more of a bitter taste. Next, I planted the Green Goddess variety of eggplant in my garden. It's more exotic looking than other varieties. Green Goddess has pale green fruit that gets 9 inches long by 2 inches wide. Its unusual color, mild flavor, and abundance of fruit make it a great addition to the garden. Green Goddess is known to be so prolific that one plant in a test garden grew over 100 eggplants. I'll really need to start paying attention to these plants once they set fruit, and then I'll need to start tying them to the stake, possibly every week. Now I like this Velcro tape because it's easy to work with, but there's a number of different methods you can use, including ladies' hose or a soft piece of cloth, whatever works for you. But you can imagine one heavy fruit or a number of fruits on one side can bend the plant over, and then the little capillaries are cut off that supply the energy and the food to the plant. And I wouldn't want to lose my plants to that. So just pay attention because once the plants start setting fruit, things really start to happen fast. People aren't the only fans of eggplants. Unfortunately, they're the favorite meal for many garden pests. One way to keep crawling pests like slugs and snails away from your plants is to mulch around them with eggshells. The eggshells do double duty because the pests don't like to crawl over them, and they also add calcium back to the soil. Two other breakfast foods that improve your soil include coffee grinds, which release nitrogen, and banana peels, which release potassium. But it's best to add these in the fall so they have a chance to decompose before you put your plants in the spring. I think this is a great way to recycle. To mulch around my eggplants, I added several layers of newspapers and then covered everything with straw. This will hold moisture and heat in the ground. It also protects the roots from sun damage and the stems from soil-borne diseases. Another benefit of the newspaper and straw, it helps keep weeds under control. Leave room around the plant stem and stake to water your new plants. All members of the tomato family are heavy feeders, including the eggplants and peppers I planted today. This means they need a lot of food in order to produce the quality and quantity of crops that I want. And applying liquid fertilizer to plants delivers nutrients quickly because the foliage also absorbs the food. And watering in new transplants is a good way to get them off to a fast start because their roots haven't had a chance to grow yet and find food on their own. When we come back, I'll check on the progress of my garden and talk more about keeping the peppers and eggplants healthy. I'll also show you when to pick peppers for the best flavor and when to pick eggplants for the best texture. Stay with me, I'll be right back.
Life's tough enough.
From the garden. I'm Joe Lample. Today I'm talking about two different vegetables from the same family, peppers and eggplants. Now it's been a few weeks since I planted them, so it's time to check on their progress. And one important step in any garden strategy is in how to deal with sick plants and how to handle pests. So let's take a few minutes to talk about each of these topics, especially as it pertains to peppers and eggplants. Peppers are generally very resistant to disease. One problem they can get is tobacco mosaic virus, also known as TMV. Peppers that have TMV have molted yellow and green leaves that look curly or stunted. Diseased plants should be removed immediately to keep TMV from spreading. You can prevent the virus by washing your hands after using any tobacco product and by planting disease-resistant peppers.
When looking for vegetable plants, look for disease-resistant varieties. This will ensure you get a good start on the growing season, and maybe late in the year you'll have some disease, but it gives you definitely a good start.
When I was checking on the progress of the pepper plants, I noticed some holes in the leaves and the fruit. So I immediately suspected either a worm or a snail because they actually eat the leaves rather than just sucking the juices out like a bug. So I began searching for the culprits, and it didn't take me long to find this guy. That's a corn earworm, also known as a tomato fruitworm, and pepper plants are one of their favorites. So I'll pick this one off along with any others that I find. But now that I know that they've moved in, I'll pay special close attention to the rest of these plants. In addition to the corn earworm, the leafhopper is another persistent pest. Both feed on stems and leaves, especially tender new growth. Leafhoppers move quickly and jump off the plant if they're disturbed. Corn earworms not only attack corn, they also eat peppers. Both of these can be controlled with pesticides. If you don't like using pesticides, you can use Bacillus thuringiensis, or BT, to control the worms organically, and insecticidal soap to control the leafhoppers. Eggplants are very disease resistant, but the Colorado potato beetle is the eggplant's worst nightmare. These fingernail-sized bugs have a black and yellow striped shell, and they lay their eggs all over the unsuspecting plant. When the eggs hatch, the young larvae come out and start attacking their host plant. If there's an eggplant in the garden, that's the first place you'll find these bugs. But the beetles, the larvae worms, and the eggs can all be picked off by hand. In addition to keeping pests away from the plants, it's also important for the plants to be continually supported. Many of them have fruit that could eventually weigh down the plants. It's critical to tie them up before the stems break, cutting off water and nutrients to the rest of the plant. I'm using Velcro tape to tie up the stems every 8 to 10 inches along the length from top to bottom. I made sure to tie the stems where the fruits were attached to keep them from breaking off of the main stem as the eggplants got heavier. These plants are really at a critical stage because they're covered with blossoms and fruit. This really demands a lot of energy from the plants. So I'll water all of the peppers and eggplants with a liquid fertilizer. And you can get this at a garden center or home improvement store. But you mix a tablespoon of this with a gallon of water, and it dissolves to form nutrient molecules that are so small that the plant leaves can actually absorb them on contact. And then any runoff will go into the soil, ready to be taken up by the roots. Do this every 2 weeks for maximum results. It's been a few weeks since I checked on these pepper plants, and some of them are ready to harvest now. Peppers are interesting because they can be harvested almost any time as long as the fruit is large enough. In many varieties of pepper, the immature phase is green, and yet they're still fine to harvest, like this bell pepper here. But if you wait a little longer, the color turns yellow, at which point the flavor is deeper. And a fully mature bell pepper turns red, and then it has a rich flavor, and oftentimes it's even sweeter. So when picking peppers, all you have to decide is what flavor is best for you. To pick a pepper, cut the fruit from the woody stem using a sharp knife, pruners, or scissors. Make sure they're clean so you don't spread disease between plants. Be sure you wear gloves and goggles when harvesting peppers, especially hot chili peppers. The juice from a hot pepper can burn your skin and eyes. Be sure to flush your eyes with water and wash your hands thoroughly if any juice gets on you or in your eyes. Eggplants have hard woody stems, so you'll need to cut them also. The smaller the eggplant is when you harvest it, the less seed you'll have and the smoother the flavor will be. Overripe eggplants are spongy, plus they're bitter, making it necessary for you to soak them before cooking. And as fall frost dates approach your area, pick off any blooms that are still on the plant. That way, the fruit that's still there will mature more quickly, and you'll get to pick everything before frost knocks out all your plants. When we come back, I'll talk about one of the most useful tools in the garden, shovels. I'll show you which type is best for use in certain jobs, and I'll show you how to keep them sharp. I'll also share an old gardener secret for keeping them clean and rust-free. About the many uses for and types of shovels. This is the one we're all familiar with, and it's probably the one you'd picture if someone asked you to think of a shovel. You can tell this one by the curved convex shape and pointed tip. But actually, this is just one type of a much larger group of tools. And depending on the job that you have laid out before you, you might need a specialty shovel or spade to get the job done right. A spade is a rectangular shovel with a flat end and a straight shape, unlike the scoop shape of a shovel. A spade is good for cutting a straight line for a garden edge or for working around a straight surface like a walkway or patio. It's also used for cutting out perfectly square pieces of sod because it cuts the roots at an even depth all the way across. There's another garden tool that's very handy for planting small to medium-sized plants, the post hole digger. It has two handles and two shovel scoops that are joined together by a hinge. To plant a plant with post hole diggers, push the digger straight down and then pull the handles apart. Then lift the digger and the dirt straight out of the hole. Then you're ready to place your plant directly into the hole. Another great tool for the garden is this hand scoop, and I like to use it in my raised beds when the soil is loose, because with one scoop I can easily dig up a hole sufficient enough for an entire root ball. But one of my favorite uses for the hand scoop is when I'm transplanting, because I can dig up a generous scoop of potting soil and easily distribute it around my plant as I settle it into the container. Shovels and spades lose their sharp edge quickly. The best way to sharpen a shovel is to use a steel rasp or file. Push the file from the shovel scoop out and over the edge to create a fine edge. Do this on the front and back sides of the blade. A sharp shovel is healthier for plants because it makes clean cuts. Rough breaks can give diseases an opening into a plant, so always cut or separate plants with the sharpest shovel you have. This bucket is the key to clean rust-free tools. This is an old farmer's trick that works really well. You fill a large bucket with sand, and it can be play sand from the hardware store, but then you pour an entire bottle of motor oil into the sand, covering as much of the surface of the sand as possible. Now this does have to be motor oil rather than a plant-based oil, so it doesn't rot or break down. To clean your tool, stick it into the bucket and move it around until all the dirt is gone and the metal looks well oiled. The sand cleans off all the dirt and the oil lubricates it so it won't rust. When you're finished, shake the tool over the bucket or wipe it off to remove any remaining sand. You can use this for shovels, hoes, trowels, and many other garden tools. Today's show was packed with ideas for growing peppers and eggplants successfully in the garden. Hopefully you'll spend more time digging into all the ideas that I shared today. But for more information on vegetable gardening, visit our website at DIYnetwork.com. There you'll find all the topics I covered today, plus lots of how-to step-by-step gardening projects. Hopefully the tips and techniques I share today will make your gardening more fun and